Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Derrek Kaff, the Chief of Police here in Woodland. I'm also a husband, a father, a brother, and a son, and somebody who's deeply committed to this community. Tonight, we're having our second community safety conversation so we can answer questions and listen to the community as we discuss topics of importance to all of us. Tonight, we're going to focus on the issue of homelessness in the community. But this is a complex issue. We are all concerned with these issues surrounding homelessness. And there's no one single reason why a person experiences homelessness. And there's no one simple solution. We're going to try and get a better understanding tonight of what the city and our partners are doing in this very critical community area. I mentioned some of my other roles because besides being the police chief, I have had family members who have found themselves homeless. Each of them had their own reasons for finding themselves in that position. But I wanted to let you know that I see this issue not just as a professional one, but also as a personal one. I also want to let you know that leading up to this meeting, we accepted questions from the community via email and our dedicated Community Safety Conversations telephone line, which is 530-661-7920. And we're going to begin by answering those. There are about a dozen or so questions so far. But if you want to bring up another question, you can do so in one of two ways. If you have a question during the Zoom event, please select the raise your hand image or dial 9 if calling in on a phone. If you're watching the event live and wish to ask a question, you may submit an email to communitysafetyquestions, which is all one word, at cityofwoodland.org. Email comments will be submitted, will be read and shall be no more than 5 minutes total when they're read. Please include the topic of your question in the email subject line. So as we begin, I'd like to set some context. I think we can all agree there are better alternatives than arrests and jail when it comes to addressing our city's homeless crisis. Because of the current state of our social safety net, police are often called to address immediate concerns of community members who are witnessing the breakdown of systemic intervention in their own front yards. While the police don't respond to address things other than criminal activity, we have pursued alternative response programs like our Homeless Outreach Street Team, or HOST. This is so we can connect with the homeless population on a very real and personal level, because that's how we ultimately make a difference. Unfortunately, sometimes there's no alternatives to a police response when someone calls 911 for help. The police officers are here 24 hours a day. And additionally, everybody has to obey the laws, and sometimes crimes are committed by homeless individuals. On average, about 30% of all of our arrests are of homeless individuals. But there are many homeless persons that have never been arrested. It's important to remember that officers come to the assistance of homeless crime victims on a daily basis. People who are homeless are some of the most vulnerable in our community, and the police are dedicated to helping everyone live without fear of crime. Police are the last resort in a long line of systemic failures that continue to prevent vulnerable Woodlanders from getting the help necessary to transition from the streets into a stable living environment. As police professionals, our hope is that mental health and addiction treatment will be expanded, and those services, as well as services related to employment and housing, will be increasingly available and easy to access. It's also our hope that state and local governments, nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, private businesses, and the community at large will come together to work on the root causes of homelessness. If you or someone you know is currently homeless, involved in the criminal justice system, and struggling with addiction, call 530-661-7879. That's the host hotline. That will help you get connected to services that can help. Now I'd like to have the other panel members tonight introduce themselves before we begin answering those written questions. And I'm going to start right over here.
Hello, my name is Kristen Klein. I'm the homeless coordinator for the city of Woodland and work closely with hosts.
Excellent. And here?
My name is Ian Evans. I am the Adult and Aging Branch Director with Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency.
Thank you, Kristen and Ian. Additionally, joining us tonight are two of our strong partners. And I'm going to begin with Supervisor Gary Sandy.
Gary Sandy, Chair of the Yolo County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Chair. And also with us tonight is Doug Zeck.
Yeah, I'm Doug Zeck. I'm the Executive Director of Fourth and Hope and other programs within Fourth and Hope, such as the Emergency Shelter and Walters House, our residential treatment program, as well as housing and other services.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Sandy and Mr. Zeck. I appreciate that. So tonight we're gonna work through these written questions, and then similar to what we did last time, we'll answer questions that come in via chat and via email. So our first question tonight is, what can be done if a homeless person is sleeping on or building a camp on my property? I'm going to start answering this one if you guys don't mind. So if your property, if on your property, somebody sets up a camp on your property, if it is an urgent matter, if the person is actively in the camp, then we'd want you to call non-emergency police dispatch, which is 530-661-2411. That's the easiest way to get an officer out there to address the issue. If the person isn't there, if they're not at the camp, that's when I would have you call the host hotline and connect them with host, okay? Kristen, anything I left out on that?
No, we try, the host hotline isn't manned 24/7, so we respond the next day. We try and get out and connect with the people if they're there. If we can tell by their camp who they are, we have a pretty good knowledge of our homeless population. We can tell typically who it is, and we can go find them and ask them to move along. We can try and connect them to the shelter, get connected with, if they need to get back to HHSA, maybe get medication appointments. So we try and make an effort to connect them.
Good. You bring up an interesting point that may help with context. Approximately how many homeless people would you estimate, or do you know, are in Woodland right now?
Well, let's see. Our 2019 point in time count was 163. Right now, during COVID and Project Roomkey, I think right now we have about 55 folks that are indoors at local motels. But we don't have any large camps anymore because we're able to get to them and respond faster. But I'd say we still have at least 160 to 180 folks.
Ian, that sounds in the neighborhood?
Yeah, that probably sounds accurate. And as Kristen mentioned, if there's individuals that are experiencing homelessness, and whether they're setting up, a camp on your property or adjacent to your property, in addition to host, we work in collaboration with host pretty much every day. We have a homeless services team with Health and Human Services Agency. And we also have lots of different pieces throughout the agency that deal with homeless services. So One of the things we do, especially if there's individuals that have small children, is we look to see if they're CalWORKs eligible and they can quickly get them into housing. You heard from one of the partners already on the line, Doug Zeck with Fourth and Hope. They have the shelter operations and a whole host of services that Host and HHSA will collaborate on to get them connected to if that's an option. And really, as Kristen mentioned, identify additional needs that they may have, connection to other housing resources, trauma services, mental health or substance use services, look at employment and income. So there's lots of different options for folks that are maybe setting up a camp on or adjacent to your property.
Good. Okay, thank you. Okay, our next question is, who is responsible for cleaning up items left by homeless on public and private property? Look, in a perfect world, right, whoever leaves something somewhere would pick it up. But the reality is stuff gets left behind. If it's on public property, then either the city or the county, whoever's responsible for that property, is going to have to clean that up. However, if it's on private property, ultimately, it is the property owner's responsibility for that cleanup. Kristen, I know you've been really involved in a lot of our cleanup efforts. Is there anything else related to that you wanted to bring up?
Let's see. It's easier if I like to say, Gina's saying is, if somebody left a sleeping bag on your driveway, you'd probably pick it up and throw it away. So to not generate police response, if it's something you're concerned about, hazardous material, obviously we wouldn't want you to, handle that. But if it's on private property and you feel like it's something that's worthless, obviously you can throw it away. But if you feel like it's of value, I think the rule of thumb is if it looks like it's $50 or more, you can bring it to the PD and we can store it, and hopefully that person claims it. Or if it's not of value, again, just you can throw it away.
Yeah, and I'm going to expand on that just a little bit. So here at the City of Woodland, we have a policy about this, about when we find abandoned property, be that related to homeless or not. And when we find a camp, we have to post that camp with a notice for 24 hours at least before removing any of the abandoned property. And then once we post it, we have to then clean it up within 72 hours. That's so that whoever's property that is, if they're coming back to it often, they see that, oh, okay, it's been posted. Let me move it. Let me take it. But let's say we post it and then the city actually does a cleanup and we take it. The city has to now hold on to all that property that for a period of 90 days, so that whoever's property that is has an opportunity to come and claim it. And this happens all the time. When this building, the police station here, was built, we didn't anticipate having to store all the stuff from all these different camps. So our property and evidence area has just exploded with this stuff that we are storing. But we have to do it that way. We have to hold on to that stuff. There's actually a court case, Levon versus the City of Los Angeles, that lays out exactly what we have to do with that property. Now, if it is somehow biohazard, so if there's mice, if there's bodily fluids, if there's things like that, we don't have to store biohazard stuff, but we do have to store the stuff that can be identified and that can be returned and claimed by somebody. So we are not going around just taking tents and pitching them in the trash. That's not what the city does. We collect that stuff, we hold it for the period of time, just like the law says, and then at that point, we may end up disposing of it. So if you want to report illegal storage or dumping of items, you can call the host team Again, that's 530-661-7879, or you can email them too at host@cityofwoodland.org. Ian, do you want to add anything to that?
I think the only thing I would add is that if it's county property, as the chief mentioned, then county personnel are often involved in that, and that could be a variety of county departments, probation, sheriff's department. We often work with the landfill, depending on the size of the cleanup efforts. Sometimes we have to secure those large kind of storage bins that you often see at, home remodeling sites. And there's a key piece that the chief mentioned around the posting there, and that's where, from the service standpoint, we'll go out and engage, and if there are active folks in the campsite, work with host and work with other partners in the community to actively engage the individuals prior to the cleanup happening, to offer them services, let them know where they can get connected, ensure that they understand that, if their property is removed, it's stored for 90 days and all that information, so that they're aware of those resources available.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question is, so once a camp is reported to the police, how long does it take to get cleaned up? So what I'm picturing from this question is, I'm a person in the community, I see a camp somewhere, let's say it's on some property, I give a call to the non-emergency police dispatch and I say, hey, there's a homeless camp over here, and we want you guys to address it. Kristen, you get these kinds of calls all the time working with the host officers. What happens?
Well, actually, now that we have a third officer, we have 7-day-a-week host response. So typically, it takes 24 hours. If they're active people, we try and get out there quicker. And like I said before, if we know them, we can communicate with them. But to get fully cleaned up, in the scenario that Chief Kaff, we could probably clean it up within 24 to 48 hours. The larger camps, where we have to give them 72 hours notice, or most recently our Caltrans camp that took a lot of collaboration, and there's a lot of protocol that we had to follow that took a lot longer. But typically 1 or 2 tents, we can clean that up 24 to 48 hours. Depending on jurisdiction issues, like if things are in between the city and the county, we try and collaborate with the sheriff's department, or like I said earlier, like Caltrans, we communicate with them because we have to use their posting on their property. So it's a little more.
Sure, I think that's good. You've mentioned twice now, if we know them. Now, I get to work with you all the time, and this is a kind of a softball pitch to you, but why is it important if we know them or not? How does that help? How does that, give me a success story.
Oh, well, we've been able to, the more we go out on a person, the more we get to learn about them, the more we build rapport with them. We get to know their history, how many times they've tried treatment and maybe failed, or family members they've lost. We get to know them really well, and it's very helpful to kind of hear their story and listen to them and kind of understand and have a little empathy and be able to meet them where they are in the field and talk about successes and what would it take to get to the next success. And it might not be housing. It might just be to, not get any more tickets this week, or maybe go to 2 groups. So the little successes that we have, we can build on them. So knowing the people is a very important piece of what host does.
Mm-hmm. And Ian, is it important for your staff to know people also?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what Kristen just said and what you shared in your opening statements just about knowing individuals that have been homeless in your own personal life and approaching it from that kind of empathy standpoint. I think often folks that are living outdoors have had a history of multiple traumas. And if they didn't prior to being homeless, they have while they've been homeless. And so a lot of times there's a lack of trust for individuals that are unknown to them, individuals from the county, from city, from PD, whoever. If they are not familiar with them, there can be a lack of trust. And so often what that looks like to somebody who isn't engaging with them every day is that they don't want to engage in services, or they're not open to engaging in services. And the reality is there's significant trauma, there's significant fear around folks not showing up consistently. So host going out routinely, our staff going out routinely, and showing up on a regular basis, showing them that some of those efforts, like Kristen said, we may want for them to be indoors, to be in treatment, to be having a job. For them, that motivation for the day may be, I haven't been able to find a meal in 2 days, so I need to find a meal, or I know that I need to go to AA meetings, but I haven't been in a year. So when you go back out and they tell you, I went to 2 AA meetings, if nothing else changed in that last week, that's huge progress. And you're helping build that rapport, and highlighting that success with folks will build that trust with them to get them further, into services and engaged in what they want to move forward in.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Our next question, and I may ask Doug Zepp to help me out with these next two. They're similar, but the first one is, will the shelter at 4th and Hope be closed once the new shelter at 102 and Beamer opens? Doug, can you give us any information you know about this?
Yeah, so the plan is that currently the main shelter where it's currently located, we're only serving individual adults at this point in time. We are not serving families at that location due to the COVID restrictions and just trying to keep families safe. And so that's the current operation. When we move out to the new location, that main shelter will no longer be used as a shelter. There will be very limited services provided there, all centered around treatment, not around housing or any homeless services. It's going to be alcohol and drug related treatment will be provided in that location. So it will no longer be, that's at the main shelter. There is long-term plans for the residential treatment facility to become housing, but all the shelter, emergency services and that type of thing will be done out at the new location.
Thank you, Doug. And don't go far. This next one, it's kind of a two-part question, but I know this is going to be easy for you. So, well, maybe not easy. The first part is, when will the shelter at 102 and Beamer open, and how many beds does it have, and how will they be utilized?
So the tentative plan is to open out at East Beamer as early as the first part of December. And logistically, there could be things that happen that would make that difficult, but we are targeting December 1st for the opening of that shelter. The number of beds, I think, was the second part of that question. The shelter was built to have 100 beds, 60 beds for men and 40 beds for women. With the current pandemic that we're all dealing with today, we will have less capacity for overnight shelter. It'll be 70. So it'd be a total of 70 mixed between men and women. So we can keep them safe, create more space in between the bunks and that type of thing. We also will have additional services out at that location that we don't currently provide, and those will be daytime services for those that want to remain at the shelter, which those that are staying at our overnight shelter today can stay there 24/7. Well, that'll be the case out there as well. But there'll also be additional services for those that may not be staying overnight at the shelter. And those services would be access to case managers to help work on a case plan, but then more practical things. Maybe they're living in their vehicle currently and they need to take a shower so they can get to their job. Well, we'll have a shower facility available for them. We'll have a laundry facility available for them, and meals. So some of the things that we may take for granted in our day-to-day life, those living in places that aren't meant for human habitation don't have those nice things, like doing laundry, like taking showers daily. So we'll have those things available for them once we get out there. So it really is going to be a nice addition to our community.
Thank you very much, Doug. Well said. Yeah, and with 2020, I know all these timelines, it's tough to predict when anything's going to happen and what's going to come at us next. Okay, our next question. This is an easy one. What is the host team, and what are their duties and responsibilities? So the host team is the Homeless Outreach Street Team, and what it involves is there are 3 police officers assigned to the host team, and as Kristen mentioned earlier, they now cover 7 days a week. Previously, they basically covered Monday through Friday. But a little less than a year ago, we reassigned somebody so that we could get weekend coverage, because what we found was we would make a lot of progress with people Monday through Friday. But then on those 2 weekend days, stuff would happen, stuff wouldn't get followed up on, services wouldn't get followed up on and checked in on, and we would lose some ground. So we now have 7 days of coverage with host. Those 3 officers, they wear a different uniform, not like the normal police uniform. So they wear tan, and that's intentional. It's a little bit softer, it's a little bit more approachable, and it also differentiates to the population that there is a separate and unique mission for them. The host officers are carefully selected for their ability to connect with people, and each of them has some different strengths that allow them to make these connections. You've heard each of us talk about the importance of knowing these people. This is because there's a different reason why each individual finds themselves where they are. The host officer's best tool is their mouth. It's the way that they communicate, the way they build a rapport, they build trust, and then they're able to help people get services. Now, working with those 3 officers, the city, we did this a little over 2 years ago. We brought on a Kristen, who is, she's been working in this field for a long time. And she actually has a marriage and family therapist, right?
License, yes.
You want to talk a little bit about qualifications and what you do for host?
Sure. Well, I got the pleasure of working at the county in crisis in many areas, even with Ian for about 18 years before coming to this job. I think this unique position, having a crisis background, is very important. We see a lot of things, disconcerting things in the community. As Ian mentioned, our clients have been victims of a lot of trauma, and it's helpful to be able to have the skills to listen, not only to be able to talk to folks, but to be able to actively listen and maybe even turn that listening into some motivational interviewing, so they can find their own strength and they decide where they want to go next, not us saying, hey, you need to do this next, you need to jump through this hoop. Because a lot of our folks have experienced a lot of case management. They've had multiple people and case plans, and sometimes they just want you to hear them. So taking this role is a little different because I've never been in the law enforcement world. So I'm learning a lot 2 years in. Still don't know really how to talk on the radio, but I try my best. It's really helping the officers, and they're helping me kind of delicately balance what we both know and both of our skill sets and work as a team. We're very close. So what happens on the weekend, we know, Monday and Tuesday, and we all follow up with each other. We all help each other. Like I said, we probably have 170 people here in the community, and we know most of them. We know when we get a new person, we try and connect them maybe back to their community if they have a support system. Because when they get displaced, hooking them up in a new community sometimes isn't what they want to do. So we work all close together. We sometimes we work with HHSA to find out where they've had treatment. when maybe they've missed appointments. So it's really tight knit.
It is. It's a complicated system to get help for somebody because the officers have access to some information, right? Our world is the criminal justice system, but that information cannot be shared with, and then we cannot receive some of that medical information. And for a real solution, there has to be a combination. And that's why this interdisciplinary team is so critical. I think it's really important to highlight that we have a mental health clinician working with the host team. We were doing this long before people started asking about this or thinking about this. The city was forward thinking and working on that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank the county for their partnership, because in July, we brought on a second clinician in partnership with the county. And so for us to have access to and be working with full-time 2 clinicians for a community our size is unheard of, not just in California, but in the nation. Just to give you a little bit of scope for what the host team does, we're going to be presenting our next quarterly report. And I took a look at some of the statistics that are in that report. In that quarter between July and the end of September, host made over 1,000 contacts with persons right here in Woodland that were experiencing homeless. Now, you heard us talk about earlier, there's probably in the 160 range of homeless people in town right now, but 1,000 contacts. And what that is contacting the same people over and over again. Because in order to get somebody to change, as we've each mentioned now, you have to build that relationship. They cleaned up 165 camps in that quarter. And then they also made 71 arrests. So it's important to note that although we always try and offer services first, there is a very small percentage of the population that doesn't want to comply with the laws. As a result, they do also make arrests. So I think that that's an important piece that we need to get out there as well. And Chair Sandy, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, Chief. I just wanted to say that I can't say enough good things about the host team, and they're such an amazing resource for the community. I had the benefit of doing a ride-along one day and found them amazingly well-informed, amazingly well-connected. It was fascinating to witness their personal relationships with the homeless, their ability to remember individual histories and individual sets of problems. They pointed out places to me where the homeless congregate or sleep that I never knew anyone was habitating there. And I just wanted to commend you and the department because they really do a super job. And I really wish more citizens had an opportunity to just sit down and discuss the realities versus the fictions of homelessness with them. It's a very eye-opening experience. I would encourage anyone to take advantage of it because they really are a super team.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. Yeah, I tell you, as I mentioned, it takes the right person to be selected for this homeless outreach street team. Each of them has, I have to get on them all the time because they use their own money to buy things and meet those little needs. Sometimes it's a meal, sometimes it's shoes, sometimes it could be whatever it is. But they also use it as ways to incentivize people to continue going to treatment, to make it to a therapy appointment, to get driver's licenses, things like that. I also couldn't be more proud of that host team. And we are absolutely committed to continuing with that. Okay, so next question is, who will be allowed to stay at the new shelter? Will it accept homeless from outside Woodland? Doug, Zach, are you still available to answer that one for us?
Yeah. So our practice today is going to remain pretty much the same once we're out at the new location. If someone calls us from, let's say, outside the area, we always refer them to services in their own, where they're currently located. For instance, if they're in Sacramento, we're going to do our best to connect them to services in Sacramento. We let everybody know that we are serving primarily the Woodland area and Yolo County, and we make sure that's well known. Now, I will say our number one value as an organization is compassion. If someone shows up at our doorstep and they don't have a place to sleep that night, we will bring them in and start to get to know what their story is, and try to reconnect them to where they are going to be best served. And we've been known to put people on planes, trains, and buses to get them to family members if necessary. And if that's what's in their best interest, we will continue to do that. I think Kristen mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that they have the support they're necessary wherever they're going, that they have the support to continue to do well. So our primary focus will be serving the Woodland area, and then Yolo County as necessary is our primary focus.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question, are homeless allowed to ask for money at entrances and exits to shopping complexes? I'll start that one off, and then I'm sure others may want to weigh in as well. But so now it's illegal to aggressively solicit and ask or beg for anything in any public place. And this is often referred to appropriately as aggressive solicitation. An aggressive manner means that they're approaching and speaking to somebody, or they're following someone during or after the asking. And if that conduct is intended or is likely to cause a reasonable person to either fear bodily harm, to have damage to their property, or if it's otherwise intimidating them into giving money, that would be illegal. But what I just gave you is the legal definition for aggressive solicitation. Now, when it comes to the entrances and exits, that's where we have to look a little bit deeper. So if you are intentionally blocking or interfering with the safe and free passage of either a pedestrian on the sidewalks or vehicles, that could be a violation as well. And then they can't be cursing to do this. Now, our city ordinance has some very specific language. And what I'm talking about is City Ordinance 9.56.080. It says that banks and ATMs, those are a special place, right? Because you're there, you're getting your money. You don't want to get, you're already maybe in the back of your mind thinking that somebody could be doing up to something nefarious being in those areas. So there is no solicitation within 15 feet of any entrance to a bank during its business hours. Now, nobody is supposed to be walking up to cars when they're in the roadway, in the street, and asking for money as well. Again, they got to stay at least 15 feet away from either the entrance or the exit of the shopping centers and all of that stuff. However, it doesn't apply if it's in connection with repairs being requested, things like that. So this is my lawyer answer to everybody. It depends. Your best bet is to call the non-emergency dispatch if you have concerns about a situation, and let an officer come out, assess the situation, and make a determination. Kristen, do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, in the past week or two, I've ran into a couple people who were panhandling, and I have to say Woodland is a very generous and giving community. This might be slightly controversial to share. One man at McDonald's made $150 after we asked him to move along. We later connected him with the shelter, and I was amazed at that. We've met people over at Walmart, which is a place that's well recognized for panhandling, make $65, and I'm always shocked. I try and encourage folks to, if they want to give or donate, they could do that to Fourth and Hope, because there they get a service where when they just receive money in the community, they might spend it on things that aren't benefiting them. And if we can donate to Fourth and Hope, I think it's a better, Empower YOLO, it's a better use of our community residents' funds.
Yeah, I agree. I'd add the food pantry to that list as well. Ian, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only piece I would add, other than what's already been said, is, we mentioned a few times, Doug talked about it with the services out at the new shelter, that, individuals that are living in a place that's not meant for human habitation, don't have access to food, laundry, often, clean clothes on a regular basis. And so I think I think it's one of the common misperceptions around a lot of individuals that are experiencing homelessness, that if you give them, $5, they're going to go buy alcohol with it or something like that, and I think what we've seen with the individuals throughout YOLO is, we're, especially right now, we're coming into wintertime. They're looking for socks, they're looking for a sweater, they're looking for a warm meal, something to help them get through to that next day the majority of the time. And so I can't, I'm not on the legal side, so I won't speak to the legal aspect of it, but I think that's from the person kind of aspect of it, what they're experiencing.
Sure. I think a logical follow-up question would be, if you see an officer drive past somebody who is panhandling, why don't they just stop? The reality is, last year in 2019, we handled over 61,000 calls for service. The officers primarily do not have time to handle, they're very complaint driven. When an officer logs in at the beginning of their shift and they enter the keys, basically they get a list that is available to them of all the calls that are pending throughout town. Those calls are prioritized by urgency and need. And so the officers spend the majority of their day going from call to call to call. The best way to address this issue is to call and get put in that queue. We will eventually respond, but we're going to go to higher priority calls first, because we want to connect folks with the service providers so that they aren't out there the next day. It's one thing to give somebody a citation for aggressive solicitation and move them along. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of value to that, because we didn't solve the root cause of why they're out there. The best course of action is to connect them with services so that they don't have to be out there, soliciting. Okay. Our next question, is it illegal to be homeless? This is an easy one. No, it's not illegal to be homeless. It is a tragedy, but it is not illegal to be homeless. Do you guys want to add anything to that? I mean,
that's a pretty easy one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. How about, why are the homeless able to hang out, smoke, do drugs, and drink alcohol in Freeman Park? Kristen, do you want to talk about this?
I can talk a little bit about that. Just as you and I are probably able to hang out if we have free time in any park we can. The smoking part, I know I work with Officer Bell a lot. I've seen her give numerous tickets for smoking in parks, and drinking alcohol in parks. That is something, if the officer sees it, that can be done. Let's see. When they do drugs, obviously that's another misdemeanor. If they're in the officer's sight, they get ticketed. So that's, what are the rules and the laws? I'm gonna let you take that part because I don't know all those.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Yeah, so Woodland does have an ordinance against smoking and drinking in the park, specifically Freeman Park. Freeman Park, you know, its geographical location, its proximity to services and to all the downtown area has to offer makes it a very attractive place to spend your time. The other thing is it's right across the street from the courthouse. So geographically, it would naturally attract people. The officers certainly do enforce the laws and the City of Woodland codes when they observe those violations. However, notice both Kristen and I said when they observe. We get calls appropriately all the time of somebody committing some illegal act at a location. If it's a misdemeanor under California law, which our drug crimes are now, if it's not committed in our presence, then we can't enforce that. And so the officers have to witness this. So a lot of times an officer will respond to the general area, then watch from afar to see if that illegal activity is occurring before making contact with the person. I know that happens at Freeman Park, but I think it's important that we remember that a lot of those crimes that years ago used to get solved by putting somebody in jail, California voters have changed that. After AB 109 and Prop 64, the court's hands were tied, which tied the district attorney's hands. And so now people are not remaining incarcerated or even going to jail on some crimes like they had in the past. If you look at this situation with some compassion or from that compassionate viewpoint, that may actually be a good thing, because a lot of these folks don't have the money to pay the fines. And although it is our job, and that's what we still do by both policy and our daily practice, we are still making those arrests and either citing or booking, depending on what the law says. There have been a number of success stories where, because somebody wasn't routinely getting arrested, they were able to have a little bit of a pause and a break. And in that pause and that break, they were able to get connected with services, and they're now no longer living homeless. Ultimately, that's a good thing, because that means they aren't out there and visible, and the police department isn't getting those calls on them. So that is a good way to address those situations. Our next question is COVID-19 affecting our homeless population? And what happens with a homeless person who is deemed COVID positive? Let's go to Ian.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So absolutely, I mean, I think COVID-19 is affecting our homeless population. One of the things we've been extremely fortunate about in Yolo County to have, and we've really been leading the state and probably honestly the nation in this response, is our Project Room Key project that folks may have heard about, but it's a partnership between the City of Woodland, City of Davis, City of West Sac, multiple motel owners, lots of providers in the community, where we're able to have individuals live in what's called a non-congregate setting, which basically means that they, have their own space to live in. And when you look at all the public health guidance, when you look at the CDC guidance around the COVID pandemic, individuals that already have significant health concerns or other risk just by the nature of living outdoors or living in a place not meant for human habitation are at a higher risk for contracting and possibly, having significant impacts or death as a result of contracting COVID-19. And so through a combination of different funding streams and really a housing first approach response to this pandemic, we've been able to house, as of mid-October, there were 512 folks that had been housed through Project Room Key. And it started as and continues as a mitigation effort for the pandemic, with the idea that we don't want the hospital systems, we don't want the medical systems to be overrun with positive cases. We don't want our public health labs to be overrun with positive cases and contact tracing. But at the same time, it allowed us to take this housing first approach, which is really when you get somebody, you look at the individual and you say, let's get them the bare necessities, the basic needs of a place to live, some food, some shelter, some warmth, and see where we can have them thrive from there. We've wrapped around case management services. We have a mobile medicine team. Kristen and others at the city are actively involved in the project. We've been able to permanently house almost 60 people as a result of the project. And we've had very few, compared to the rest of the county numbers, very few individuals living homeless that have tested positive for COVID-19 as a result. And when we have had it, we've been able to quickly mobilize with our partners to get folks into appropriate non-congregate shelter settings where they can be safe and their loved ones can be safe. And it's been a truly remarkable effort. We're well past this now because this was as of October 19th, but we provided over 42,000 combined bed nights for individuals in Yolo County through Project Room Key. And as I said, I think comparison to the county numbers, the individuals experiencing homelessness in terms of their positivity rate has been, less than what we're seeing countywide. It's been a remarkable effort, and I think, we've talked a couple times, and you've heard us mention the partnerships throughout the conversation already multiple times with throughout the county. Homelessness is such a complex issue that being able to utilize this model and have the other existing supports we already had in the community, like a Fourth and Hope and some of the other providers and partners we have in the community that consistently show up for the homeless population, I think has been a reason why we've been able to have such a great impact in Yolo during the pandemic.
Well done. And thank you to you, your staff, and the county for that. What's astonishing to me is 60 people getting permanent housing. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I do think, and I think this is not one of the questions, but one interesting thing that when I talk to people about homelessness that I try and get across is think about your wallet or your purse. For me, I put my wallet in the same place every night so that tomorrow I can find my wallet because it's got my driver's license, it's got my money, it's got all those important things. When you're homeless, many times you don't have that one single place. And so as a result, a lot of folks don't have identification. And in order to get access to a lot of services, we need to have ID. Kristen, what happened? Have you ever run across this?
Yes.
And can you give me a story about IDs?
I think lately we've been running into a lot of folks, continuously people lose them, as Chief Kaff said, they don't have a spot to keep them. They're stolen, backpacks are stolen. I've started recently going to the DMV and waiting with people and helping them fill that out so we can take a photocopy of it so that if they lose it, it won't at least they can get Medi-Cal started, they can get CalFresh, they can get, GA or food stamps going. You need to have that. And as he said, our folks really have a hard time with this task. I mean, how many of you like going to the DMV? It's not a pleasant procedure. With COVID, it's even more difficult. A lot of our folks recently haven't been able to read that well, so that's why I've started going there with them. We'd pass out the free voucher and end up losing it. So I'm having a lot of success actually getting people IDs. The county's been helpful in getting birth certificates. Sometimes we have to go backwards a little bit to go forward. I think even social services will help pay for getting birth certificates.
Great.
It's really helpful because if we are going to go down that road where we're applying for SSI or they're getting a job, they really need that. That's like the basic piece of information they have to get started.
Mhm. I also want to highlight that when somebody's ready to accept help, before they can get into transitional housing where you need the IDs and you need all these other things, that's where this partnership with Fourth and Hope is key, because they're able to bring folks in and they have staff as well that help with all of these same things. Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
I just always like to kind of explain the context that we live in each day is not the context that somebody on the street is living in. And you touched on it, and I think it's a good point. Many people sometimes find themselves in a place because of a series of maybe bad choices that have just compounded over time to the point where they're not worried about making decisions anymore because they haven't panned out so well. So it's just trying to find, and I think that's the upside to the shelter and just being able to know that tonight I don't have to worry about where I'm sleeping. So now I can worry about the things I should be worrying about, getting my ID. I know I've got a warm bed to sleep in tonight at the shelter. So that's taken care of. Now today, all I have to focus on is just getting my birth certificate or just getting my ID. But you don't want to focus on those things if you're really concerned about where am I going to be tonight? And so that's the advantages in the emergency shelter, because it is an emergency situation for them. Our hope is that they don't get stuck in the shelter, and with housing being hard to come by so often these days, people do end up in the shelter for long periods of time, but it also gives them an opportunity while they're there to get jobs. There's been times in our recent past where we would find, I remember having this discussion probably March 15th, but we had of the 25 men that were staying in the shelter, 18 of them had jobs. And so they had a place they could sleep at night, they could shower daily, do their laundry and go to work. That didn't happen the first day they came in, but that's why these services are so important. And that's why the partnership's important. Fourth and Hope doesn't do all the work. The host team doesn't do all the work. There's many good partners throughout the county and throughout the city that work hand in hand, work together to make this happen. It's truly a partnership because it is very complex, to what Ian said before. Every situation is unique. Every person is special. And so it takes a complex system of services to help people get back on track.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Ian?
Chief, if I could just kind of highlight a couple of, just build on what everyone's just said around this and even tie it back to the question around the rules and laws in Freeman Park and everything is not only to get into that housing option, do you have to have the ID and birth certificate and some of those, key documents, like you said, that folks don't often have that same place to leave every night. But if there are consistent convictions on their record, that makes it that much harder for them to maintain housing. Luckily, we have some great programs and great housing facilities in Yolo County that will work with clients that have those convictions, but that's yet another barrier for them finding a permanent solution. One of the stories that always comes up for me around this is it's hard enough to get an ID and a birth certificate and everything. We had an individual who was born in a different state, and they actually got a death certificate when they were born, not a birth certificate. And so it was like double work to go back to prove that they were, for one, still alive and that they were that person. And that's just some of those pieces that have to happen along the way. And so I think that's important context for folks to understand too, because I think, you know, if you see the same person out in different areas throughout the city or county, often it sometimes reinforces that idea that, oh, that's somebody that doesn't want help. And maybe they are actively engaging in those steps and they just take a while, like Doug and, you know, others have talked about so far. And while it's not exactly the same percentage post-COVID, pre-COVID too, the vacancy rate throughout Yolo County was extremely challenging. And so if folks found themselves newly homeless, it was hard to get them into units. We had, I think in most jurisdictions, we had less than 1% vacancy rate. And so even the folks that have gotten their ID and gotten their birth certificate and don't have those evictions and convictions on their record, it's challenging sometimes to even find available units for them. And it takes a lot of work and effort into building relationships with the apartment owners and low-income housing units and looking at the different permanent supportive housing options that are available throughout the county that, you know, Fourth and Hope and Davis Community Meals and Housing and so many others throughout the county operate. That I just think that's we're not unique in Yolo in terms of the vacancy rate, especially in California, but certainly in some of the surrounding counties around us, I think we're a little bit unique in that sense.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. See, we got a hand raised. Sebastian Glover, are you on?
I'm here.
Hi, Sebastian.
How are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Good. My question is, why are homeless people steal beer from a grocery store and have been kicked out? What should you do when the same person has been kicked out enters the store?
Excellent question, Sebastian. Thank you. So if a person has previously stolen from a store and that person, if the store contacted law enforcement, what we'll do is we'll address the crime that day. So if the store wants prosecution, they would be arrested. Depending on the dollar amount would determine whether they were going to get a ticket at the store or booked into the jail. But then additionally, the store has the opportunity to give a no trespass warning. So this does come up. This happens quite frequently where someone, because of their proximity to a certain store, will repeatedly commit a crime there. And this isn't just homeless people. This could be the entire population. Whenever that happens, the officers encourage that no trespass warning, because then on subsequent violations within a close proximity of time, there's the additional charge of trespassing. The officers then write up that case and it eventually goes over to the district attorney's office, and then they will work through the process of getting it through court. Thank you very much for your question. It was good to see you the other day when we did our trick or treat event too. Wonderful to see you.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
So when the store manager didn't call the police and the officers didn't show up.
Interesting. If that ever happens again, I encourage them to call back to dispatch. If you're ever unsatisfied with the service, or if you believe an officer has not responded, that's something that our supervisors want to know. So at any one time, there is at least one sergeant and 4 officers working for the entire town. That one sergeant is responsible. They're kind of like the quarterback of the team. They oversee it. They're assigning out jobs. They're getting the information and resources to the officers. and coordinating and following up on service. The sergeants actually even do customer satisfaction follow-up. So I'd encourage you to call back or have the store call back and then ask to speak to the supervisor and just express those concerns. Thank you. Are there any other hands raised? Not at this time. Okay, I'm going to give that another couple of minutes so we can see if we get any other questions. Oh, we do have an email. Okay. Can you send that to me? While I'm waiting for the email to make it over to me, I just want to explain to everybody. So you notice we are wearing masks. We were trying to get the right distancing, but because, you know, we work in different environments all the time. That's why we have the masks on. I apologize. I know it makes it hard to understand, but we are trying to follow the county's guidelines along this. So our email question tonight is, we've discussed panhandling, and the assumption is that people are adults that is over 18. My concern for the parents who involve their minor in some ways, very young children, with the panhandling, even if just to stand out there to play with people's hearts and to give for the children. What is the approach the police department and host takes with these minor children standing out there on street corners? I see this especially around the holidays out in the Costco Target shopping area. Should we call when we see this happening? Excellent question. Kristen, do you want to start us off, or do you want me to start us off?
Sure. From the host standpoint, I do have to say we haven't encountered, I think most of this occurs over on Bronze Star Drive, over near Target. We've talked to those couples quite often. And in fact, they aren't homeless. I'm not saying that always happens, but the few times we have communicated with the families, I don't think there's a law. I mean, we definitely try and connect them to CalWorks, make sure that they have services they need, but they have not technically been homeless.
Yeah, I'll jump in real fast, and Ian, if you want to weigh in after that too. But so if the situation is dangerous, or if the children looked disheveled, malnourished, they're in any, you thought there was any danger, absolutely, I'd want you to call whichever was appropriate, either the non-emergency dispatch line or even 911 in some instances, if it's an emergency that has to be addressed right away. But give the officers an opportunity to go out there and assess the situation so that we can see what's going on. I think, you know, Krista brought up a good point. This is one more reason why donating directly to one of our various nonprofits here in town, it's really the best idea, because they make those connections and they know what the needs are and they're able to help people out. Donating is an individual choice. I'm not going to tell anyone not to donate, however you choose. But when you look at all of the needs, each of the organizations, each of the nonprofits could serve more had they had more funding. So that's always a good idea as well. Ian, do you want to add anything to that?
I think just highlight, Kristen mentioned CalWorks. That's a great resource we have in the county that can often, if there are families experiencing homelessness and they qualify for CalWorks, they can quickly get them indoors. The other piece, we have, you know, the softball question that you answered earlier is homelessness illegal? And the answer is no. It's also not a child welfare issue strictly to be homeless. Like you said, if there's some other issues going on, then it could be, but it's not a CPS or child welfare issue strictly for the fact that there are children involved and they're experiencing homelessness. So I think that's important for folks to be aware of also.
Absolutely. And Doug, I know that we have serviced families through Fourth and Hope. Do you want to weigh in at all?
Yeah, the current situation for families within our county is families are well served through the CalWorks program. There are a few that do not qualify for CalWorks, and so we have in the past served them, as well as those families that may be served through CalWorks. Today, fortunately, recently, we were able to receive some funding to continue to serve families that may not be CalWorks eligible. And we will be doing that as we move forward. But because of the pandemic, our families are finding themselves well served in hotels throughout the county. And so not to say that there aren't people, our families, I should say, with children on the street, but if there are, I would definitely be reaching out to local places like ourselves, host. There's really no reason today that families with children should be unhoused on the street. There are resources out there for them. More resources for families throughout Woodland and Yolo County than there is for individuals, for sure.
Excellent, thank you. Any new questions coming in? No? Okay. Well, with that, I'm gonna kind of come around the horn here, and then we'll end up with, I'll go to Doug Zeck and then to Chair Sandy, and then I'll finally finish us off. But Kristen, any final thoughts on the issue of homeless that we didn't talk about tonight that you feel we should talk about?
Well, I didn't probably touch enough on the successes. I think it's what keeps the 3 officers and myself coming to work each week, not only to continue to have contact with the individuals that have moved into permanent housing, the ones that are beginning to talk and seek treatment at HHSA and connect with other teams. It's really inspiring. It's rewarding. This is a challenging job. It's challenging for our population to get into services sometimes. So they need a lot of help. We have to make a lot of connections. So when they do get housed, and we have had, I can think of at least 4 or 5 folks recently. One of our males that was living in Freeman Park for the last, I think, 12 years, he's permanently housed in it's not transitional, permanent housing with Fourth and Hope. And he's managing, and he had a companion animal, and he most recently had to have his companion animal put down. It was a big trauma for him that he finally, was in housing. He's been successfully housed for about 1.5 years. Officer Bell and myself went over to his house, just to keep him connected. We didn't want him to relapse. We didn't want him to, take a couple steps backwards. He's an elderly gentleman, and we reminded him that winter's coming. He definitely doesn't want to be outdoors anymore, but it's those little things. Or somebody completed treatment this week, and we can take him a Slurpee. It's those little wins that kind of keep us going. So it's very important to measure not what we're not doing, but the successes we are having, and highlight those, and kind of thank our partners for what they're doing and what they're involved with, helping get connected with medicines through HHSA, or, Nadia's team goes and visits them and brings them a popsicle one day, when it's hot outside. It's just really important that they feel, a little bit special, because maybe there's been a time in their life, probably a long time in their life, that they haven't felt special. So we can't do that all the time, but we try.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ian, same.
Yeah, I mean, the type of stuff Kristen was just talking about is really, when you're talking to individuals who are experiencing homelessness, when you get to the point where they trust you and will open up to you, you often hear that they want to feel part of the community, and they felt for so long ignored. People don't look at them when they walk by on the street, and they they don't have that sense of community like a lot of us have. And so I think that's a really important piece to the work, and just continuing to show up. I think one of the things that I just want to highlight as well is every 2 years we do what's called the point in time count, an unsheltered and sheltered combined count. So we're coming up in January 2021 to do the combined shelter unsheltered count. Kristen mentioned the numbers, for Woodland from the 2019 count. One of the things that we saw too, one of the questions we ask is, how long have you lived in Yolo County? And I was looking at our 2019 numbers, knowing that we were going to have this session tonight, and more than 50% of the individuals in 2019 who were unsheltered homeless in Yolo County have been here 10 years or longer. So 9% have lived here their entire life. So these are our folks. I mean, you touched on it in your opening kind of remarks, that these are our brothers and our sisters and our mothers and our fathers and our uncles and aunts. And these are people that have lived in the community for years and years, and for whatever reason have found themselves living outdoors. And so I think there are varying resources out there, and I just want to leave folks kind of with that information, and just that piece, full circle back to kind of how you started, is just that empathy piece for these folks that are, at a tough place in their life, that are experiencing homeless for a wide variety of reasons.
Absolutely. Thank you. Doug, any closing thoughts for us?
I just say I'm in a place of gratefulness. I know we're in November and it's the month of Thanksgiving, but I'm just very grateful to be a part of this community doing the type of work that we're able to do. Woodland and Yolo County has been committed to serving the whole community as long as I've been around. And Fourth and Hope's been around 35 years now. Probably less than 15 years ago, we built the new shelter that we have today. And at that point in time, homelessness and just the visibility of seeing homeless individuals and neighbors, part of our community in and around town, dropped drastically because the shelter was there. The need has far exceeded our capacity in that location to meet the need that we see on the daily within our communities. And so I'm excited again in this partnership with the county and with Woodland, City of Woodland, to be able to expand services for our neighbors, for our brothers, for our sisters. It's not somebody else's issue. It's our whole entire community's issue. We are one community. We're not if there's people in our community hurting, then we're all hurting. And when we all decide to address the hurting and the needs within our community as one community, we're going to see some great things come in the future. And the health of our community is not dependent on our police department. It's not dependent upon the county or on Fourth and Hope. It's dependent on all of us. And so we're just here to help facilitate us being a healthy community. And we look forward to the great things that are going to come in just a short few years. And so I think, again, our partnership with everybody that's on here tonight, and really the partnership with all of the community members as well. So thank you for having us on here tonight.
Well said, Doug. Absolutely. Chair Sandy, do you got any closing thoughts for us?
Just that I have great appreciation for this forum. I think the opportunity for the public to call or email in and get direct answers to their questions is a remarkable one. And I would encourage everyone to take advantage of it. I think looking forward, one of the big concerns that I have at the moment is, of course, this specter of the possibility of funding falling off, which may result in a record number of evictions for people who are currently living in housing and who, when the eviction protections elapse, may find themselves out on the street. So I think a well-prepared community is going to be best able to serve those individuals, and we need to be mindful of that. The other thing is that the homeless are not a monolith. There are 1,000 fascinating stories, and they are all different, and they all have different conditions. And it's important to understand that and not treat them as if they are a monolith. The other thing is that one of the lessons that COVID taught us with putting them into motels was it's a lot easier to manage that population when they are housed than when they're out on the street. I think we had some excellent experiences with them, but we're better able to keep track of them, keep track of their medication, and ensure that they were in safe places. And that was a real eye opener, I think, for a lot of us. We also have what's called the Executive Commission in the County of Yolo now. What the Executive Commission is a collaboration of the cities and the county on homelessness. So we're not dealing as disparate bodies anymore. We're now comparing notes, asking questions about is the homeless population moving or migrating? The annual point count, we're increasing and improving our training on that every year so we have better documentation. So there's a lot of work happening at a policy level to ensure that here in the county, we have a better handle on homelessness than we ever have. And so I think that the end result of all these efforts is going to be better management, and I hope a better place for the homeless and for the community as a result. And thank you for inviting me on tonight, Chief. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. And to everybody, again, if you take one thing away from this, I would ask that it be, this problem is complex and it involves people. Every single one of them has a story. Just as Supervisor Sandy just mentioned, they all are individuals that have needs, they have dreams, and sometimes, yes, they do step out of line and law enforcement has to get involved. But the Woodland Police Department's focus, our efforts center around services first. And then if the services are not working, that's when we would go to enforcement. I really treasure our partnerships with everyone that is involved. And to put an event on like this, simulcast in both English and in Spanish, took really three very special individuals. We have our two court interpreters that have come in tonight to make sure that this message could be broadcast in Spanish. I really appreciate your hard work and dedication. And then my director of our Unidos program, which is going to be Corporal Maribel Cortez, she also is there making sure that as questions came in from the Spanish speaking side, they were quickly translated back to English and funneled to me. And then finally, the person who put all this together, my executive assistant, Trista Kennedy, thank you for coordinating multiple very busy schedules to get somebody from the Board of Supervisors, the executive director from Fourth and Hope, it's a key person from Yolo County HHSA, somebody from Host. It was not easy, let alone all the advertising and everything. I appreciate your efforts. With that, I would wish everyone and their families a wonderful night. I encourage you to wear a mask, maintain your distancing, and wash your hands. Thank you for joining us, and good night.